don't talk about Spawn enough. We talk about Marvel and DC variants all the time, but that's old news. Today on Top 10 Nerd, we're talking about the top 10 alternate versions of Spawn. Coming in at number 10 is Omega Spawn. The Omega Spawn is what would have happened if Malebolgia and Satan had their way with Al Simmons. In the Omega Spawn storyline, Satan gave a Hellspawn complete control of Hell and unlimited necro power to combine the forces of Earth and Hell in order to defeat Heaven. For this to happen though, Hell had to conquer Earth first, and that's what the Omega Spawn set out to do. He unleashed all the villains imprisoned in Hell and sicked them all on the hapless mortals of Earth. That's us. But he decided it wasn't worth his time when there is a whole universe of planets that he can conquer instead, and that's what he did. But while he was out doing that, he ended up being teleported back to Earth and trapped there, and that made him not too happy. So he comes back to try and conquer Earth, and that brings him into direct conflict with the other Hellspawn, including the main universe Al Simmons, and he needs as much help as he can get with this guy. Number 9, Medieval Spawn. Naturally, Medieval Spawn was not only a Hellspawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 others mistook the king's angry rambling and ranting for direct orders to wipe out who the king was talking about. So he went and took the life of none other than the Archbishop of Canterbury. Once the knight passed on to the afterlife at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to Hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Malebolgia and returned as a Hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing any person who chooses to don his helmet. Number 8, Gunslinger Spawn. Gunslinger Spawn made his debut in Spawn 174 and 175, originally known as Jeremy Winston. He crossed paths with Al Simmons' grandfather, Francis Parker. Now, Winston's life took an extremely, and if you've read Spawn before, pretty expected dark turn when he was unjustly blamed for the tragic loss of his family at the hands of some greedy landowners, and the vengeful townsfolk of Bain, Colorado, back in 1881, took out their own form of justice on Winston. However, fate had other plans for Winston when the demon Mammon extended an intriguing offer: a fresh chance in the afterlife as a Hellspawn. In a twist of destiny, Winston accepted this offer, and thus the Gunslinger Spawn was born. His emergence marked a brutal reckoning as he sought vengeance, mercilessly dispatching the entire town, leaving only Francis Parker alive under orders from Mammon, who hinted at grander and more sinister Hellspawn schemes yet to unfold. Number 7, Japanese Spawn. A lot like Marvel's Wolverine, Spawn's immense popularity led to a unique Japanese adaptation of the character officially licensed as a manga. The creative force behind this 200-page manga is Juzo Tokoro, who not only provides the artwork but also skillfully weaves the narrative. In this distinctive Japanese take on Spawn, our anti-hero's name is Ken Kurosawa, a destitute street thug who ekes out a living by undertaking some pretty unsavory jobs for quick cash. However, Ken's life takes a tragic and pretty familiar to Spawn fans turn when he's ruthlessly slain by the very clients that he served. Much like Al Simmons' transformation, Ken too is resurrected as a Hellspawn. Now, what's intriguing is how the manga draws eerie parallels between Ken's life and Al Simmons' life, creating a captivating narrative that melds the spirit of Spawn with a distinctive Japanese twist. Number 6, Dark Ages Spawn. In the realm of Hellspawn history, predating the advent of Medieval Spawn and his exploits in the gritty medieval landscape of England, there was a character with a distinctly metal edge, known as the Dark Ages Spawn. He was an intimidating presence during the 10th century in the tumultuous backdrop of post-Roman Empire Europe, aptly named the Dark Ages. Before donning the mantle of a Hellspawn, this mysterious character went by the moniker Black Knight or Lord Covenant. And while those names are, yes, very edgy, he himself was far from the typical dark-hearted villain. Instead, he championed the cause of the common folk, often coming to the aid of unfortunate peasants in their times of need. His heroic nature sets the stage for the intriguing dilemma that the Dark Ages Spawn faces upon his transformation into a Hellspawn. Confronted with the choice of using his newfound powers to protect the innocent peasants from the ravages of ruthless warlords, or seizing the opportunity to become the ultimate warlord in Dark Ages Europe, his path was anything but clear-cut. Whatever he decided to do, he would be known as one of the most badass looking Hellspawns around, because he really is. Number 5, Hellspawn. Who would have thought that Spawn, a character already shrouded in ominous darkness, could have an even darker counterpart? Well, it may not come as a surprise to comic book fans, especially the fans of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, but it is none other than Brian Michael Bendis that came up with the ingenious creation of Hellspawn, a version of the character that is somehow even more dark and adult. This spin-off from the Image Comics franchise takes Spawn into an even more mature and disturbing realm, delving into the grittier aspects of life that I really can't even mention here. Some might argue it wasn't necessary, especially with already unsettling characters like Billy Kincaid, as an example, lurking in the mainstream Spawn stories. However, the birth of Hellspawn injected a somewhat fresh dose of vitality into the Spawn universe. It plunged deeper into the abyss, creating an atmosphere that was even more twisted and nightmarish. In this grim spin-off, Spawn becomes a lot less chatty and a lot more trigger-happy. Number 4. Angel Spawn. The two eternal brothers of God and the Devil had and have power far beyond any mortal could ever hope to achieve, at least in the comic books. Because of that, when they decide they don't agree on certain things and go to war, it causes quite the ruckus, and of course, they choose the Earth as their battleground. Now, the mother, who is like their mother, needs to put this to an end and calls on Spawn to do it. In order for Spawn to end their squabble that made its way to Earth, he had to get a wee bit of a power boost. More like a god-sized power boost. The mother tasked Spawn with eating the forbidden fruit to grant him a kind of godhood, and in this new form, Spawn wipes out all the forces of both heaven and hell. Yes, God and Satan eventually do defeat him, but Spawn is soon resurrected and uses his powers to lock away the brothers and resurrect all the mortals who were taken out in their war. Number 3. War Spawn. In Spawn number 179, we meet Captain Thomas Coram, an English soldier in the midst of the First World War. Now, Thomas led a life of privilege and comfort, but also had a secret love affair with Selma, an African-American woman. Their relationship takes a tragic turn when Selma departs after giving birth to their son, Michael. Now, it would be years before they're reunited, and the circumstances absolutely sucked as Thomas promised to look over Michael on the front lines of World War I. Tragically, Michael is KIA, and this event drives Thomas to make a desperate pact with Mammon to become a Hellspawn in exchange for his son's life. Thomas's journey as the War Spawn unfolds in the infernal battlegrounds of Hell itself, an eternity spent in ceaseless combat. Meanwhile, Michael's descendants, his granddaughter Wanda specifically, goes on to play a pivotal role in the life of Al Simmons, the future Spawn, as his wife. Number 2. Norse Spawn. Introduced by Bo Smith and Brad Gorby, the Norse Hellspawn made his first appearance in Spawn Fan Edition number 1, emerging as the fearsome Viking raider known as Nordic. Now, Nordic liked to spend his free time doing all the wholesome stuff you're used to, like raiding and pillaging. However, his reign of terror met a fierce end when he faced off against McFallen, the Dragon Master, a renowned champion of the people. Now, taken to Hell, the impressed male Bolgia offered Nordic the ominous opportunity to become a Hellspawn. Without hesitation, Nordic accepted this. With his trusty horse Ghoul and accompanied by 2 fearsome wolves, Demas and Darkos, the Norse Spawn resumed his reign of terror 5 years later as one of the most terrifying Hellspawn ever. His vengeful path of destruction led him back to McFallen's village, where he exacted revenge by wiping out its inhabitants and reducing the village to ashes. However, he was thwarted in his attempt to dispatch McFallen himself thanks to the intervention of Mercy, a hunter from heaven. When the odds turned against him, Male Bolgia intervened, pulling Nordic from the battlefield to preserve his life, as he would become the benchmark by which all future Hellspawn would be measured. And finally, in at number 1, Samurai Spawn. The Samurai Spawn made his dramatic debut in Spawn number 114, within a tale narrated by the demon Mammon himself. This story transported us to the feudal ages of Japan, where we encountered Lord Izanagi Nakadai. On the battlefield, he was a figure both feared and respected, a warrior of great renown. But upon his return home, he faced a heart-wrenching reality when his beloved wife and son had succumbed to a devastating fever during his absence. In his grief, Lord Nakadai withdrew from the world, living as a solitary and mourning figure. Yet his solitude was eventually interrupted by an old man who gave him cryptic warnings of an impending dragon battle. Now, draped in armor and wielding power, both reminiscent of a Hellspawn, this formidable warrior embarked on a journey across the land. His mission? To protect the people from the threat of ruthless bandits and bring them salvation as he traveled the path that led him to a climactic showdown with said dragon. However, a tragic twist of fate unfolded as he neglected to heed the old man's wisdom and failed to look into the eyes of the dragon. When he finally returned years later, he was met with a desolate and ruined home. The samurai Spawn returned in the modern day Japan and faced off against Al Simmons' Spawn himself. And the battle was very fierce, each demonstrating their martial prowess. Yet, it was the modern Spawn who emerged victorious, as was going to be the case no matter what, leaving the fallen warrior who finally gazed into the eyes of the dragon, which was Al himself. And that is the list. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video. Gold star for you. My name is Adam Andrews, and I will catch you guys on the flippity flop here on Top 10 Nerd. But until then, stay safe and peace out, you nerd.